Hey, welcome to another installment of Catching Up. I'm Sam.
I'm Chris.
I'm Jake.
And this week we have quite a bit to share with you. We also have an interview with Brandon Dayton to talk about his new book, Green Monk. But yeah, in terms of, in addition to that fantasy original graphic novel through Image Comics out in September, Jake went to San Diego Comic-Con. I went to a wedding and saw the Japan Droids. Chris saw Searching.
I liked it.
So stay tuned and you'll get all of that. Joining us this week, we have Brandon Dayton. He's the creator of Green Monk, which gets its first volume with Image Comics out on Wednesday, September 26th in comic book stores everywhere and on Comixology if you're more digitally inclined. Brandon, thanks for coming on the show.
Yeah, thanks for having me here today.
So with this, you've kind of got this medieval Russia at once, shades of mysticism, shades of kind of this sword and sorcery action, but all within like the trappings of the Eastern Orthodox aesthetic and religion. What made you kind of want to explore, all these very desperate topics with Green Monk?
That's a good question. I don't know if it was such like an intellectual motivation as it is just kind of one of those things that you have some separate ideas, and once you start mashing them together, they really excite you. And I think that was kind of the case for me. I had this concept of a monk that had this like blade of grass as a weapon, and then I saw there's this Russian film, Andrei Rublev, which is kind of this like long plotting Russian movie about a Russian monk. And I just got really excited about the idea of setting this character in that setting. It was just a very unique setting to me. It's an area of history I was just totally unfamiliar with. And so, it was just kind of that spark. When those things kind of came together, I just got really excited about it. So
yeah. It's kind of wild if you think about it. Like, Russian history doesn't start in the United States until like the War of 18, or until like the Napoleonic era. They're like, oh yeah, then this happened. And it's like, oh
yeah, absolutely. I think we certainly have like a certain amount of cliches with Russia. I think most people I talk to are like, oh, Baba Yaga, Rasputin, and then it's like, the revolution, and then, USSR, and like, it's kind of this small little collection of cliches about Russia. So it's very deep, rich history once you start looking into it. And so it's been fun to kind of explore with this.
Sure. Now, you had originally self-published, this is very much a labor of love, very much a passion project with Green Monk. How did the partnership with Image Comics to get this going, get this new volume out kind of come about?
Yeah, well, I did this self-published piece, almost 10 years ago now. And I've just been working. I've been working in games, doing concept art for most of that time. After I made that first book, I really knew that I wanted to focus more on comics someplace, sometime. But the demands of making video games were just kind of too much for me. And then just a couple years ago, I decided, with this awesome support of my wife, that I was just going to quit video games and just focus on making this book. So I sent Image like segments of this book all along the way as I was building it, and I received some interest, like, oh, this is interesting, send me some more stuff. But I mean, I really have to give credit to Ryan Otley. He like encouraged me to like finish the entire book. He's like, finish the book, I'll send it over. And once he did that, it was very, very fast. The response was almost immediate. That they were interested in publishing it. So it was a fairly frictionless process to get Image to pick it up. So I was really excited about that.
Right on, man. Yeah, I feel like that's how a lot of, because we've had people like Clugston Flores and stuff on there, and yeah, as soon as like Image finds out that like, oh, this is like the heavy lifting's already done, bring it on over.
Sure. Yeah, there's so much less risk when you just know a book's finished. You can see the whole thing. It's like, oh, sure, all we got to do is publish it. Like, great, yeah.
Sweet.
Easy to do.
Yeah, cut it, print it. So with, you had mentioned the video game background. You've got some very immersive and in some cases very surreal environments, even, throughout this medieval vision of Russia. You've got some very, one of the things I love about this is there's a lot of silent sequences, and yet you convey a lot of emotion in the action. Is that something that you would say kind of came from a background in video games?
That's interesting. I think I reference film a lot more for kind of the things that I try to do with storytelling. I studied film in school and kind of just gave that up and decided to go more into art. But I would say that I learned some things from video games, and there are certainly certain video games that I really admire, and I think it's because they have an aesthetic that appeals to me. I mean, one that I think is somewhat similar. I don't know if you've ever played Journey before.
Oh my God, yeah.
And I just absolutely love that video game. It just feels like, I mean, it sounds dumb, but it feels like you're going on a journey. There's this very linear aspect to it, and I've always really connected to games that are basically a form of storytelling. I'm not as crazy about the idea of games I'm not into the branching narratives, because I feel like I have to like go and talk to every single person with an exclamation mark over their head. But I love these very guided, thoughtful experiences like Journey, like Portal. And yeah, I think I wanted to do something similar with this narrative, that it's a very clear, defined kind of a journey and path that I was trying to take the reader along, with this character, kind of just going through. I mean, one of the things I really like from these video games is how they have contrasts, like they'll have, especially with something like Portal, you may play a section where you have these really tight, confined spaces, and then suddenly it opens up to like a big, vista and view. And so that's something I really wanted to do with this, just to have some contrasts in tone and pacing and content.
Sure. And you've kind of, I mean, this is an origin story of sorts for our titular monk, and you find out, kind of the origin of his mystical weapon and his own kind of tragic destiny, really. I mean, I feel like a lot of Russian literature, I don't want to call it like necessarily pigeonhole it as depressing, but there's a lot of, they're not afraid to embrace the more bleak elements of a story or an emotion.
Yeah, that's a good way to say it. Is that, I mean, I'm not a hugely well read with Russian literature, but I have read some things. I've read a little bit of Dostoevsky and some Lermontov, and yeah, they're not afraid to shy away from like the ugliness of life or the difficulty of life. And I mean, it gets pigeonholed a lot of times as just that Russians are depressing, but I think there's more to it than that.
Sure. Yeah, I have to ask, because I was getting shades of this, and this could just be me projecting because I do that. But are you a fan of the Legend of Zelda series?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, mostly, I have to say mostly kind of the first, I think 1 and 3, like the first Legend of Zelda, and probably the third, like
Link to the Past.
I remember A Link to the Past. I absolutely love Link. That's probably my favorite Legend of Zelda. So. Not as much the ones after that. I don't know if that was where you were going, but
well, no, I mean, you kind of get that with, I mean, dude is the green monk. He's got the blonde hair. It's kind of this fantasy action adventure,
Mm-hmm.
So those aesthetics are definitely there. I mean, Link to the Past is up there. I was always big. Ocarina of Time might be my favorite of like game of all time, not just of the franchise. So, were you more a Super Nintendo than a Sega Genesis kid?
Yeah, I did Sega Genesis too. I actually was more of a Sega Genesis kid myself, but I also did Super Nintendo. And I kind of got back into it like several years ago, got an emulator and started going back and playing all these games. Mm-hmm. Like I kind of like fell in love with Super Metroid and replayed Link to the Past. And I mean, those are my favorites of kind of from that Super Nintendo generation.
Oh yeah. I mean, I think I have more vintage games than I do like current games. So there's something nostalgia is one hell of a drug, I think, but there's just something, there's a quality to that era as well.
Yeah, I love it. And they've like managed to be kind of, what's the word? Not universal, but like they're still appreciated. There's a quality to them that's never kind of gets old, I think. And I think it's to tie it back to stories. I think there's kind of the best video games are really similar to good stories in the sense that it again is an experience. It's kind of this like Joseph Campbell hero's journey thing where you leave this point of safety. You look at what Zelda is. You're exploring around. You're going into caves. You're fighting monsters. Like that's like Joseph Campbell. That's like the hero's journey. So. Yeah, I think I'm just in some ways trying to tell that same story,
Well, the fascinating thing I've seen with like the vintage game thing is I bought one of those Sega Genesis like minis recently with like the preloaded games on it, and I bought like Judge Dredd and RoboCop vs. Terminator for like $1 off eBay. Not really $1, but it was cheap. But I've realized how terrible I am at games now because like all the Call of Duties and all the other stuff has like you get shot a bunch of times, you just hide behind a brick wall and you like regenerate like Wolverine, and then you're back into the fight. Where like, I hadn't played those type of like side scroller games in years, and so I was just getting my ass kicked left and right. And my first console I ever had was a Sega Game Gear, which still works if you hold it just right and plug it into a charger in the wall. Like I don't think there's any sound left, but yeah, I mean, I think like you were saying, like there's just something timeless and classic about that 16-bit, 8-bit design and just being thrown into like, you can have these, mega adventures with barely any kind of graphics. As long as it has a kind of a solid story and an interesting character, you're going to go a long way with it.
Timeless. That's the word I was looking for. Timeless. Yeah, I think we just underrate the ability of people for their imagination to kind of fill in gaps. And there's something about like really sparse storytelling that can be like very powerful. Like I got this big book of fairy tales that I was reading with my daughter, and it's like you read these fairy tales and they don't give a lot of detail, but the stories are like really moving. I was really surprised by like, oh man, that's such a sad story. That's such like a powerful story, and it's simple. You don't have all this character backstory. It's just like this person wants this. It causes this conflict. This happens. And that's like something I really would like to be able to do more of in storytelling, to kind of like pare down what's the essential, what's the absolute least I need to be able to tell the story effectively or powerfully.
Would you say that kind of dynamic, that stripped down aesthetic, is what led you or inspired you to kind of go? Again, there's entire sequences. This book moves at a decent pace. Like despite being a full-on graphic novel, it moves at quite the clip, because there are entire sections where it's just action. There's no dialogue, or maybe not even like big hyperkinetic action sequences, but you know how to kind of embrace the quiet moments without cluttering it up with dialogue as well. Is that something that you were very conscious of when you were crafting this volume?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, partially that's just my preference. It's like I'm the type of guy that reads something like Dark Knight, and I'm just like, I don't need all this. I don't need this internal like monologue from Batman. Just him swinging through the rain is like enough for me. Mm-hmm. And I guess I do kind of have a little bit of a bias towards like visual storytelling. Like for me, when I look at comics, I'm like, comics are about the visuals, and I like kind of that visual flow of things. And yeah, I'm definitely kind of the guy too that when I read, I feel kind of bogged down when I'm reading too much dialogue, and like I want kind of the minimum necessary to move the story along. At least I feel like that's what I want to do with this story. Like a later story, something might work better, but even then, I think I'd want to be sparse with dialogue. It's just kind of my preference.
Have you ever read A Land Called Tarot by Gail Bertrand?
I don't think I have, no.
It's an image graphic novel, entirely silent, and it's very, very kind of like, I want to say it's like very Miyazakian. It kind of has that visual aesthetic.
I think someone has showed this to me before. I'm just going to look it up real quickly to make sure I know what you're talking about. Sure. Yeah, I think I've seen this before. Someone just showed me some of the images before, but yeah, this stuff, I absolutely love this type of stuff.
I feel like that's right in your wheelhouse.
Yeah, it's a little bit. It's like Miyazaki and a little bit of Moebius kind of slammed together. But yeah, I mean that's kind of one of the things I was thinking about a lot with this too. Is like I love kind of the pacing of Miyazaki films and his comics too. Mm-hmm. And I like the idea that he has these like quiet. He really takes the time to slow down. Give you a sense of the setting and then again talking about contrast, and then you have like those like noisy, loud, boisterous moments that come out, and I really like seeing that in storytelling. With Green Monk, I mean, as you had mentioned, it had been 10 years since you had self-published, the first Green Monk tale. How is it easy for you to kind of get back into that world creatively? Both as an artist and as a writer. You mean the world of like trying to publish something and get it out there, or the making of stuff? Well,
as you're approving like proofs, or as you're drawing and kind of revisiting the world, just how is it kind of getting back into that mindset?
I have to say I've really enjoyed the experience of kind of learning to tell stories visually with comics. I mean, I've done it much more within the last 3 years, which has been awesome that I've just been able to focus on that. I feel much more confident in that arena, my ability to tell stories. I'm less comfortable with this kind of second phase of like, okay, now I got to promote this thing. And I got to figure out, am I going to do signings someplace? What conventions am I going to go to? I got to send retailers stuff. It's a little bit, I'm getting used to it still. So this is especially this is the first time I've done a book with a publisher. And so I'm kind of learning the process of like how I got to do all this stuff,
Sure. Well, hopefully we're not too intimidating for you.
This stuff is fine. I like this stuff. I mean, chatting's always great, but there's also part of me that's like, geez, I need to be starting on the next thing. Like, what's the next thing going to be? I need to be writing that. I need to be getting that ready, So, yeah, that transition of between like finishing one project, promoting it, transitioning to the next project, I haven't quite figured out yet. So we'll see how that goes.
Yeah. Well, I mean, you're doing fine so far. But yeah, so with you had mentioned cons and everything. When the book comes out late September, what do you have any cons planned in Baltimore or Small Press Expo, New York?
Yeah, well, so you guys are kind of in the DC area, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so I'll be doing Baltimore. So I have Baltimore. That one's ready to go. I might be doing New York. So I'm still kind of just trying to decide. I'm not going to be tabling there, but I might just go out and just like do a signing there, which is fine, just to go out for a day and kind of check it out.
Sure.
And then the only other one I have planned is CKNX, which is in Burbank.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if you guys are familiar with that one, but it's a little bit more like an animation focused convention. So it's a lot of like animation professionals there. But I feel like it's a good chance to have kind of like a different crowd. And then I have a couple signings. Like I've had some stores that were really supportive of like the mini comic. Mm-hmm. So I'm like try to go out to those stores and like do a signing with some of those too.
Yeah, I mean we'll definitely be at I'm being in the DC area, like as you pointed out. Yeah, I try to be at Baltimore every year. I'll probably do in press there with CBR, and Jake and I will. Well, I don't know. You don't know if you're going to be I'll be at New York. I don't know if you'll be at New York.
Yeah, I mean like I always make like circle the calendar for Baltimore to go. It's just like a fan. Like one, it's like only 40 minutes, down the road. And like, I just love that one as like a nerd to go like fill holes in my collection. Cause like I love that show. So
that's what I really like too.
Oh, it's definitely my favorite show. Like I do, I help out Image and do like, Sam and I both like will, work like San Diego or New York or, Seattle. So I'll be at San Diego and probably New York this year, but like Baltimore is the one I make sure to go just as like a fan and just have fun. Cause yeah, like you were saying, like it's the perfect place to go and just, go through stacks and find like random little treasures and stuff in there. And yeah, that's my favorite show. Cool.
Yeah. And that's what I'm trying to like, figure out, parse is like, there's definitely starting to be a big variety of types of Comic-Cons, and I'm veering away from like the fan-focused Comic-Cons that are all about celebrities and stuff. But like, Baltimore, Emerald City. I wish I could get into SPX. I apply for the, lottery every year. Haven't gotten in yet. Places like Toronto Comic Arts Fest, Space, just any of those that are kind of like the more, anything that says Comic Arts Fest, you kind of know that's going to have like the right focus. So those are the ones I'm really looking at.
Yeah. Well, that's cool, man. I mean, like I said, we'll be around. We'll to help Sherpa you through, because New York can be a bit of a circus. But the so you had kind of teased that you don't feel obliged to necessarily divulge. But what do you have planned next, creatively speaking?
Yeah, so that's a really interesting question. I mean, like I said, it's like I don't even know what the right next step is. So, I mean, I do have some potential additional Green Monk, stories I can tell, and Green Monk's an origin story, so it sets up for a continuing, ongoing thing. Mm-hmm. And so, like, that's an option. So, I'll probably try to pitch something like that. Like, I would love to do Green Monk as like a monthly series. I've never had experience doing that. It'd be really cool to be able to do like a monthly series and see what that was like. And I have some other concepts too that I kind of need to work out. I have this one concept that's kind of like, you might describe it as Midnight Run with post-apocalyptic fantasy characters.
Nice.
So, and I need to work out the kinks on that one, but that's the other one that's kind of like that's simmering that I think could be a lot of fun to do. So
I always one of our favorite books on the show, and we've had him on a couple times, is Andrew McLean's like Headlopper, because that originally started out.
Gosh.
Yeah, that started out self-published too, and then it went from like. I guess he still publishes it quarterly, but yeah, it's not the conventional like 20 to 23 page monthly, right?
Yeah, such an interesting format because it's usually like 40 something pages, but it's still like saddle stitch, so it's not like a trade, you know. So I'm really curious about how he like kind of decided he wanted to do that, and how he kind of like figured out and worked that all out with Image. But yeah, that's such an interesting book, and I love the format and how he does that.
Well, it was very laissez-faire for him, like because again, he had started self-publishing, originally kickstarted it, and basically when Eric Stevenson and all them had expressed an interest, he was like, hey, I like doing like these 40, 50 page quarterlies. Is that fine? And Stevenson was basically just like, yeah, that's okay. Like it's very just kind of like, yeah, that sounds good to me.
And it sounds like it's working for him too.
Oh yeah,
I mean, it's been like sustainable, and I mean that's the most important thing. If you can be sustainable as a comic book artist, that's like a holy grail.
How is the train? You had mentioned you've been working in comics steadily for the past 3 years. How has that own kind of like transition been for you?
Yeah, so it was I'm not gonna lie, like it was a rocky transition. It was really exciting because it's like I've been wanting to work independently for a long time. I mean. It was really awesome opportunity to work in games. I worked with a lot of amazing, brilliant people, and I grew so much as an artist working at the studios I worked at. But it was never like my cup of tea. Like it wasn't like my passion. Everyone else there was so much more passionate about games than I was. And so it was really exciting to leave, but like figuring out how to work for yourself is tough to figure out. So I think it really took me about a year to really figure out like how to just be productive with my time working for myself. I personally am not good working from home. So like I had to find like a co-working space to work at. And that made the biggest difference. Like once I did that, once I kind of figured out, like after you use a certain amount of pages, it's like, it starts to click, and it's like, okay, I have this process. So after about a year into it, I felt like I got really comfortable with the process and started to move a lot more quickly. Unfortunately, I had a chance to do a couple of like work for hire gigs along the way. Like I did one of the issues for Jim Henson's Storyteller Giants. So there's like 4 in that series, and I did one of those series, and that was really cool to challenge to be like, here's a 22-page story. I got to write and do art for it. It was very different than what I was doing with Green Monk. But that was like great learning experience on like that process of writing and staying within a schedule. Just because I have, up until Image said, okay, we're going to publish this, I've had like zero accountability. So, it's been easy for me to kind of like take my time, really put a lot of detail into things, but I haven't been like busting out pages like super, super fast the last couple of years.
Right. And that was what, through Boom Studios?
Yeah, that was through Boom. Yeah.
No, yeah. I mean, it's weird being your own. I think that's why, in the early days of Image, like in the 90s and everything, you would get these massive delays because they were no longer like drawing for Marvel, right? So they're like, oh, yeah. Well, this issue of Spawn is done when it's done, or this issue of like Wildcats or whatever. They're just like, all right, well, here you go.
I remember back at that time reading in the back of the comics, and they'd be like, yeah, it turns out we need editors, so we're going to try to start using editors more so we can get this stuff out sooner.
Yeah.
Right.
So, Brandon, something we ask everybody that comes on our fine program, what are you currently geeking out over?
Oh, geez, that's a good question. I'm trying to think what recently I've been watching or looking that I really, really liked. Okay, the one that's kind of more unusual that I think people should check out, a little more challenging, but I recently watched another Russian film called, see if you can remember, Hard to Be a God. Have you guys heard about this?
No.
This movie? Oh my gosh, it's It's a really challenging movie. It's by director Alexei German, and it's a story that sounds like a pitch for like a Star Trek series, because it's about these like advanced humans, and one of them goes down to this like medieval world to try to kind of like observe, and he just kind of gets caught up in the politics of it.
Sure.
So the movie's super hard to follow. It's like one of the grossest movies I've ever seen. It's just like takes that medieval, like you imagine like Monty Python, kind of the gross Monty Python and the Holy Grail, and they just take that to another level, all in black and white. But the world building, the level of detail is just like mind blowing. Like that's what I've been thinking a lot about. So yeah, one to check out. Totally confusing. I had no idea what was going on. I went and read the novel. I had to go back and read the novel that it's based on, just so I could understand what was going on in the movie.
I mean, you had kind of touched on this earlier, but between the inspiration for Green Monk and this sci-fi film, what is it about Russian culture more abstractly that you find so fascinating, not just as a storyteller, but as a fan?
Yeah, that's interesting. I have kind of gravitated to a lot of like Russian storytelling. Maybe this one is just kind of out of chance, but I mean, I really, really liked Andrei Tarkovsky. I've seen a lot of his films. You know, I have read some Dostoevsky. I really am drawn to like the characters too that are these kind of like monastic characters. And you have like Brothers Karamazov has one of those characters. Mm-hmm. You have that in Andrei Rublev as well. But yeah, I don't know. I mean, I think that this Hard to Be a God, I was drawn to it because it had a vibe to me kind of like a Tarkovsky film. And it turns out that it's something different, you know. Like I talked before about contrasts, and this movie, there's no contrast. It just like hits you. It's like nonstop 3 hours of a specific, very intense, like visceral feeling. Mm-hmm. But it was definitely one that like made me think and made me wonder like how far you could take the art form.
Yeah. It's always that, now that you mention it, it's always like, it tends to run on the longer side. Like you look at the length of like Dostoevsky or Tolstoy, or you look at like, yeah, the Tarkovsky films, or I remember they did that adaptation of what was it, Anna Karenina, that was like 3 hours or something like that. And then they always go for broke on the runtime or just the sheer length too.
Yeah, they like to take their time with things. Yeah, I'm kind of torn about that. I don't know like how much, like how far I want to go down that road. Mm-hmm. But I really also I recently saw Annihilation. I loved Annihilation. Did you guys see that?
I keep meaning to see. Like I always see it. Like I do a lot of all my movies like digitally now, and I always see it like on sale because I assume like not enough people are checking it out. And it's like always on sale. I'm always like, because I love Alex Garland's previous work. I love Ex Machina. I love Dread, which he apparently ghost directed as well.
Yeah.
But for some reason, that was a movie that it came out in like February. I just kind of missed it, and then it was gone. And that's a shame because I like that cast and I like that director. I just haven't had the time to check it out.
Yeah, he's kind of developing this aesthetic that almost feels like this like updated, almost Geiger-esque aesthetic that I really like. Just this really creepy aesthetic. But I out of chance, I happened to watch Labyrinth like the week before I watched Annihilation, and like the two movies are like insanely similar in structure and plot. So that's the way I would recommend to watch it. Watch Labyrinth and watch Annihilation, and then tell me what you think.
I might just do that. You know, if there's an entire sequence of Oscar Isaac singing Magic Dance, I'm in. That you know, as I'm sure many people my age, that really was my gateway into David Bowie. So whenever I listen to like Rebel or anything off like Ziggy Stardust or anything, it's like, oh yeah, and this is like Jake is gonna like hate me for this, but I'm just like, hey, yeah, that's the dude from that's Jareth the Goblin King. You know, that association, that first recognition is just gonna always be there with me for the rest of my life.
It's gonna color everything.
Yeah.
That's how I am with Flash Gordon and Queen. So that was my first introduction with Queen, was the Flash Gordon soundtrack. So that's always what I go back to when I hear them.
Well, that soundtrack. I mean, there's only like 2 songs with actual vocals, but like those 2 songs rip and just absolutely destroy. Like,
Yeah.
the Hero and the Flash Gordon theme is like the greatest. There's a great YouTube clip of I forgot what, like Fuse, like it was like Artist Takeover or whatever, and the band Muse did like the Artist Takeover for like they were in charge of the videos that were going to be put on, you know, Fuse for like that hour or whatever it was, and they chose like Flash Gordon by Queen, and they can't stop laughing because they're like, the harmonies on this song are out of control. Like, Brian, there's only one guitar player in Queen, and there's like 100 guitar harmonies. Like, it's just absolutely amazing. But yeah, Flash Gordon is like the greatest. I remember stumbling across Labyrinth like on TV, and I was like, what is Jenny Blake from The Rocketeer doing with David Bowie? Like, that was my,
no.
Yeah, I was like, what?
That's how it was back. That's what was so amazing back in the day. Cause you know, where I grew up, it was always like Saturday afternoon on like the UHF channels. Mm-hmm. That's when you would see all the like obscure, like horror fantasy films, and you just turn on the channel and you'd be like, what am I watching? You know?
Oh yeah. That was the best.
Yeah.
I mean, I got nothing on the Queen. I think my gateway was what News of the World with We Are the Champions and all that. Flash Gordon came much later, and then I was like, oh cool, James Bond is Errol Flynn, and then I saw The Rocketeer, and I was like, oh, James Bond is still Errol Flynn. But I mean, before we return you to the wilds of Utah, Brandon, do you have anything else you'd like to plug? Again, Green Monk, Blood of the Martyrs comes out on Wednesday, September 26th, out in comic book stores everywhere in Comixology. But yeah, Brandon, do you have anything else that you got out there?
Yeah, I mean, I would just point people. I mean, you can pre-order it now at your local comic book shop. You can also pre-order it over at Amazon. So, you know, you can go do that right now if you want to, and make sure you get a piece of the action. I'm also in the midst of doing something this summer called Sketchbook Summer. It's a summer drawing challenge I do, where you're basically challenged to fill a kind of standard sketchbook within 30 days. And so I've got a bunch of resources and, you know, information on that. If anyone wants to check that out, we're almost halfway through the month, but people can, and so we usually do the challenge in July, but people can start whenever they want. So they can go to like sketchbooksummer.com if they want to check out that challenge. It's kind of a cool way to challenge yourself as an artist.
Cool. All right. Well, again, Green Monk out everywhere on Wednesday, September 26th. Brandon, thanks again for coming on the show, man.
Yeah, thanks for having me, guys.
Good talk as always. So,
Yes,
what you boys been up to?
I'll get this out of the way first, I guess.
Yes.
I'll go first. No, I did San Diego Comic-Con with the lovely people of Image, the best. Worked a booth there. Vernon, who's been on the Superman show. Corey, of course, who's been on multiple episodes, and a bunch of just other great people from Image. And friends. So no, it was great. I mean, you know, it's crazy as always, and the big thing was Image Comics Deadly Class. Well, I'm sorry, Rick Remender and Wes Craig's Deadly Class
On Sci-Fi
is coming to Sci-Fi. Check out the trailer; it's awesome. And they had a big signing with the creators and the cast,
including Benedict Wong
himself. It was really cool. They seemed like really just like excited to be there and excited for the book and everything. And it was a great atmosphere. The signing went super smooth. There wasn't any craziness, which is always nice.
Every time I've crossed paths with Rick, he seems real laid back.
He seemed like he was just loving it. I mean, hell, like him and Wes's like creation was this beautiful backdrop. If you go on Rick Remender's Instagram, he posted a photo of it, and it's kind of this great shot of like the characters from the book and then the characters from the upcoming TV show. And yeah, it was a lot of fun. It was kind of nice. It was kind of like a quiet, like I don't like going nuts or going to like, you know, the bar scene and like all these big dinners and stuff after a con. I just want to hang out and sit around and talk about whatever. And that's what we did most of the nights. We would go and hang out in the hotel room and grab food and just wind down. And then there's this Indian place that we went to last year. Sam would remember. I don't remember the name of it, which is terrible, I know. But it's the fucking best. It's really good. So hopefully that'll become like a reoccurring thing. We did it to end the show, like that Sunday night when, like, most of the people have left. It was easy to walk the streets. It was like a ghost town compared to a couple of days or just the day previous.
Oh, the Gaslamp District always fucking
crazy, man, crazy. And
crazy nights.
Yeah, and
which gets referenced in Preacher.
Hairstar shoots the radio because it's playing over and over again. And speaking of that, I finally finished Preacher. I finished something finally, guys. Yeah. I'm also caught up on the show too, but no, I don't know what, a couple episodes ago I had referenced that I'd started reading Preacher again. I think I'd got as far as like issue 15 when I first started, and just like I said, could never finish anything, and I kind of fell off. I was like, no, I'm finishing this shit, and I did. I finished it sitting in bed or lying in bed that Sunday night after the craziness of San Diego Comic-Con, which seemed kind of perfect because it was just like quiet, dark, and I'm just reading it and finished it, and I finished it and immediately reread the last 2 pages because I was like, whoa, wait. That's crazy. So much of this book has been Garth Ennis and Steve Dillon, writer and artist, did such a great job of setting things up that would pay off later, and just Garth Ennis, I think, is one of those guys that gets pigeonholed as just like extreme language, violence, kind of intense guy, which he is, and he does that really well. But he also will throw in like these really like sweet, lovely moments, and absurd moments as well. But it's a comic. it's probably. I'm Mr. Hyperbole when it comes to stuff I like, but like it's one of those comics. It has everything. And I remember hearing an interview with Garth Ennis where he's like, I literally just put every movie I ever saw growing up into it. There's elements of everything. I've talked about how it's a horror comic, it's a romance comic, it's a humor comic, it's a western.
It's a western, yeah, totally.
It's got all of that.
A pastiche.
It's just everything in there. Some of the most just vile fucking people you've ever met in a comic book. Some of the most lovely. I remember before I started reading it, someone had mentioned it's like Jesse and Tulip's like one of the great love stories in comics.
Yeah,
and it is. Because it's not perfect, it's not like this, everything goes right kind of thing.
It's not a fairy tale.
It's definitely not a fairy tale. And Jesse Custer's like just one of the fucking coolest, most badass characters in comic history.
Do you think Dominic does a good job capturing that?
He does. But I think one of the things on the show that's really interesting is in the comic, his dad is a Vietnam vet, a Marine. Some great revelations about him, like later on, like just fucking floored me. Like I read this comic like I'd never read a comic before. Like I was going, oh my god, like out loud, like slamming the book down. Like I couldn't believe shit. And I've said it a million times. I'm just amazed working at a comic shop that it was never spoiled. Because whenever anybody would talk about Preacher, they would just go, it's one of the greatest comics of all time. Yeah. That was enough. They're like, just one of the greatest comics of all time. They didn't have to go like, okay, so there's this moment. Like, no.
Remember when Saint of Killers does this?
It was literally just, dude, that's one of the greatest comics of all time.
Yeah.
Like, easy. And they'll go, I'll reread it, every so often.
There's part of me that wonders how many people have actually, like, read it.
It's, now that I finished it, I'm just like, holy shit. Like, this is, like, I want to just talk about it with everybody. But talking about Dominic Cooper, on the show, his dad is a preacher. So on the show, his inspiration to become a preacher is kind of mixed from what I remember so far with the show. Like he wants to do his dad proud, I think, but it's also the grandma thing is in there like it is in the comic.
Yeah.
In the comic, he never really ever wanted to be a preacher. Also,
he falls into it.
And the great thing about season 1 is he does a lot of like preaching. That's something that you don't see in the comic very often
because of what happens to his church.
Yeah. But he has that like humor. He has that like ass kicking. Like it's just crazy. Like just this preacher going around just beating the shit out of people. He does a great job. They all do a great job. But if you want to talk about like perfect casting, we throw Robert Downey Jr. in there for Iron Man. Chris Evans for Captain America. Joe is it Gilpin who plays Cassidy. I mean, it's just Cassidy. Like they found like real life Cassidy to play Cassidy. It's incredible. The only difference is that when he's talking in real life, he's British, not Irish. But everything else, I mean, this guy is like it's crazy.
And Ruth Negga is Irish and not
Irish and not Southern. Yeah, no one's Southern out of the three.
Yeah.
And then Dominic Cooper is British and plays Southern. But the show has just been fantastic, and it's great now. Like, it's really, obviously, this is a no-brainer, but it's really enhanced the show now because I saw the Comic-Con trailer, and then I watched the latest episode at the time of recording. I think it was episode 5, The Coffin. So much stuff now. Like, I'm starting to see stuff from that they're starting to pull from like later volumes, and
it's not just a straight up adaptation.
It's definitely not, which is cool. Like I said, like having read the book, I don't want to just see the exact thing I just read, you know, but I want to see, but
the way Watchmen effect.
Yeah, but they touch on things, and they're introduced, like the latest episodes introduced some really cool stuff.
I've only seen the first episode, as you've shown me.
Yeah.
I bought the first season on a drunken bender on St. Patrick's Day.
Yeah. Cassidy would be proud of you.
Yeah. One of the better drunken decisions I've made. I like that. Yeah, I remember watching it. I was like, well, that's not how, but it doesn't. It's like it's both like an annotation and it's like an appendix, an appendix, the appendices, and like a remix at the same time.
Yeah, and there's all these elements.
The apocrypha, as it were.
To quote Chris, sure.
That's a Catholic term too.
Yeah, all these elements are there, but it's just done in a wild, crazy way. And I was watching one of the I might have been the first preacher panel from San Diego. Was it 2016 where it premiered? And Garth Ennis was like, yeah, I think he was talking about how some of the stuff they come up with is even better than he came up with, which must have blown fucking Seth Rogen and Evan Goldberg's mind, because they've said multiple occasions their favorite comic book of all time. It's just such a wild ride.
It's so good. It's so good.
It's batshit crazy. Sam and I have definitely talked a lot about how much we love Westerns. And
it's a great comic.
It's just I can't say enough good things about it. That's one of those comics I will reference and try to get people to check out as much as I can. I'm sure people in San Diego, when I wasn't at the Image booth, because I was going to be talking preacher nonstop at the Image booth, but whenever we had free time,
you can see the Vertigo panel down the.
Well, it's funny because DC did have.
Oh, it was on there last year too.
Was it on the top? Yeah,
they had their banner.
Yeah, it makes sense. But yeah, they had it there. I was like, oh, cool. The Volume 1 cover of Jesse over the burning church. Yeah.
That creepy ass smile.
Yeah. Oh, those Glenn Fabry covers. Oh my God, they're so good. But yeah, I was just talking everyone's ear off. It's like, oh my God, preacher. Oh fuck, I'm 100 pages left of this and that.
I think that's Layman's favorite comic too.
Really?
Yeah.
Man, it's crazy. And then I immediately was like, well, I'm gonna jump in.
See that as straight bullets. Yeah.
Jump into. I'm reading the Hellblazer and his stuff and the boys.
Which is coming to Amazon.
That's right.
By Seth Rogen and Evan Goldberg.
That's right. And isn't Carl Urban playing the lead?
Yes.
Butcher?
Yeah.
I cannot wait to see how they adapt that thing.
I think it's supposed to be early next year is when we get the boys.
The boys. That's freaking wild, man.
Since you're on Amazon, you can fucking do anything.
Yeah. From the volume and a half I've read of that book, they're going to have to be able to do anything with that one. And then, I started his Constantine run, Hellblazer run, which is considered, legendary, and a lot of times his books will pop up on best of Constantine lists. But yeah, man, I was talking to Sam earlier, I think now it might not even be close if there's any creator I've read more of than Garth Ennis, just because of how much Punisher he did, reading all the Preacher, including the one shots in the miniseries, the Saint of Killers miniseries, and starting the boys and Constantine, Crossed, and it's nuts. I've read some of the the World War II, World War I stuff he did. Yeah. Preacher was the real deal. There's a certain feeling you get when you read a comic. You can you can love a comic even, and you're like, that was great. But there's a certain feeling you get that's it's something else, and I've mentioned it with Animal Man, Death of Captain Marvel, those type of books where it just sits there with you for a while, and you're just replaying it over.
You have to
over.
recover,
Yeah. And the fact that, that shit lasted 5 years. I can't imagine issue to issue, like,
Waiting.
that journey though. Like, oh yeah,
Yeah.
especially because like there's some issues you finish, you're like, what? But like going on that journey, that must have been crazy reading that last issue.
That was basically the series that replaced Sandman, right? Because Sandman starts late 80s, runs for like 75 issues, ends around the mid 90s, and then Preacher basically
picks up.
Yeah, because Garth had just finished like Hitman over in the main DCU.
That's right, and then he does the Hellblazer stuff. Was like late 80s, early 90s is when he finishes up, I think.
Yeah.
That's really I think sort of cut his teeth with like American audiences probably.
He is the first, like, Jamie Delano is the one that launches Hellblazer on Vertigo, but he basically, like, Garth is basically the guy that's like when it makes the full-on transition to its own thing. Because there was that awkward period where stuff like Sandman and Swamp Thing and Hellblazer were still part of the DCU, and then like as Vertigo started to gain steam, they're like, make it its own. Like,
and it ran for what, 300 issues, right?
The original
Hellblazer.
The original Hellblazer, absolutely.
That's crazy, man. Yeah, I mean it's cool. Just going back and reading this stuff, and Preacher is one of those books that's always people are always whenever they bring up greatest comics of all time, greatest runs.
I really will have to watch the rest of season 1.
Yes,
I haven't.
Yeah, no, I mean it's season 1 is fucking great. Season 2 is out of control, and they keep going like, just wait, and like
well, you've read the book,
Yeah, but I mean, oh my god, now, especially the later stuff. I am very interested, and it's cool because it has like a clear end game. Like I really like that with comics because like
that was my thing about Sandman. One, it probably didn't have to run for 75. I love Sandman, but it probably didn't have to run for 75. And then they kept
it's like coming back again, right?
They keep bringing it back.
Yeah,
I'm just like after spoilers for Sandman, but after Morpheus dies. That's it.
Yeah.
That's Sandman.
Yeah.
Like the entire story of Sandman is essentially what happens when the God of Dreams finds out he's going to die. That's the story of Sandman. And then when he dies, he passes it on to Daniel or whatever, but that's the story.
Yeah. Another quick thing about Preacher is like the crazy that like Steve Dillon, he was the artist on all 66 of the main issues.
Yeah, no,
I mean,
nobody can
fucking nuts. And it's a bummer. I mean, obviously he was around to see the beginning of the show, and I forgot what episode it was, but they dedicated it to Steve after he passed, and it's a bummer he's not around to see like as it keeps going. But I mean,
as it's like kind of finally, because Preacher, for all the acclaim, again, when I say like I don't know how many people have actually read it, I feel like because like one, nobody fucking talks about it.
Yeah.
It ran its course, but it was part of that. Like it was running at the time when like comics commercially in the United States were at their like lowest, like after the big '90s bust. And so I feel like it's always been that, and maybe it succeeded because of it creatively as a book. It always kind of existed under most people's radar. And so now that it's like, now it has it's on AMC, right?
Yeah.
It's the lead, it's basically takes up their summer season between seasons of The Walking Dead.
Yeah.
But Better Call Saul comes back soon.
That's exciting.
I already pre-ordered it on Vudu. No alcohol required.
That's the sober man's choice.
Yeah. The glowing endorsement from Sam Stone.
Yeah.
No alcohol required for Better Call Saul.
Yeah. I like what I've seen of Preacher all one episode.
Yeah. And the first episode's like I think an hour. Like it's like close to like a big time episode.
Yeah. But no, Better Call Saul is one of my favorite shows on TV right now. So be interesting to see where that goes next. But Odenkirk's the man. Just Odenkirk.
He's great. I kind of did Preacher for Better Call Saul. I think I've only seen the first episode. I think I watched it with you back then, and it was great because like I had binged the shit out of Breaking Bad, like a freaking psycho, and then Better Call Saul came out basically, and I was like, oh shit. But I haven't really dove into that yet.
It's good.
Yeah, is it all on Netflix?
First 3 seasons, yes.
Cool.
Chris.
I did a little some this week. Nothing quite as exciting as going to San Diego. But I did get in to see a pre-screening of a new movie coming out soon. Stars John Cho. I've been getting his name wrong all week, but yeah, it's John Cho. It's called Searching, and it's all about a father's struggle to find his missing daughter. The thing that kind of sets us apart, if you guys haven't seen the trailers for it and whatnot, is that it's all essentially shown from the perspective of his personal computer.
I've heard about this.
Yeah. So about a year or so ago, an episode of Modern Family did this as like a little experiment on style, and then the movie Unfriended: The Dark Web has done the same thing. I think that's either out now or coming out around the same time.
Did you ever see the first Unfriended?
I did not.
Okay,
solid.
I hear good things.
Yeah. I now that I'm like talking about Searching with my friends, everyone's like, "Oh, Unfriended," and I'm like, "Yeah, never seen it." And they're like, "Oh, it's pretty good.
It's a Blumhouse joint."
Oh
no,
shit!
I do enjoy the Blumhouses.
You know what the next Blumhouse joint is?
I did until you asked me. Feel free to enlighten.
Halloween.
I hear that's quite good. Or at least it looks quite good. I've only seen the one trailer. But so it's really good, guys. Searching. I went in with low expectations because I was like, okay, that episode of Modern Family was cute, but I don't know if I could, sit there through a whole movie, watching someone's desktop, with a fake mouse cursor clicking away. But the name of the director escapes me right now, but he had like a little blurb before the movie where he talked about like making it and like all the other like experimental filming that he does, because that's his like bread and butter, is to really manipulate the way that we watch movies, or the way that he presents movies more specifically. But like he really like took the time to really like figure out how he could use the medium, or this specific like subgenre of the medium to his advantage. And like there are some really good moments of tension that he's built into just like the placement of the windows on the screen, and like a slow reveal where John Cho's character has like a couple windows pulled up and he's like, wait a second, this person looks like this person in this picture, and you get that slow reveal while he's dragging it across going, it can't be true, it can't be, oh god, and actually like no dialogue going on through it, you just know how it feels while he's doing it just because of the pacing of it. It's just really, really surprisingly like well done. There's the if you're paying attention, there's a couple Easter eggs hidden here and there throughout the screen, and he does a great job of like I said, with the window arrangements, like letting you know what's important to be focusing on, or what's like a minor detail that like you should be paying attention to just because of like how things are displayed, things are arranged on the screen. And then like there's so much storytelling through just visuals of like montages of clips from and pictures that the family has saved up throughout the years. It basically has you guys know the opening to Up. Mm-hmm. It basically has a very similar opening done completely in Windows XP, because it shows like the first family computer.
Yeah.
And it's just like no dialogue for the first like 5 minutes of the movie, but it shows the daughter growing up, and then certain medical issues that happen with the mother, and really sets up the relationship between the father and the daughter throughout the rest of the movie, and why maybe the father feels really guilty for letting certain things happen that lead to the daughter's disappearance, and like there surprisingly like a good number of twists and turns in it as well. So I like I said, thoroughly enjoyed it. When it comes out, I recommend everyone check it out. And also, like, I totally understand if you want to wait until it comes out on home video so you can watch it on your computer to get that full immersion into it. Like, it's I'm all about the movie theater experience, but it is not something that like requires to be seen in a movie theater, like a big action movie or something like a Fast and the Furious. Like, you're not going to be able to recreate the theater experience with that. But something like this, sorry, I'm burpy. I had dinner. But yeah, something like this, I can totally understand. Wanting to watch it on a computer, probably would be quite interesting. But yeah, so that's my 2 cents on searching.
Search.
Yeah. But yeah, aces on that movie.
Diamonds.
Oh, forever. What about you, Samuel?
Well. I did 2 things of repute over the weekend. First, I saw the Japan Droids play at the Rock and Roll Hotel.
I've heard of them.
It's great. They did a good job. The AC broke.
Oof.
So that place was a fucking sweatbox. But you know the cool thing about Japan Droids? Being Canadian and very polite, they went out before their set and got like 5 or 6 cases of like ice cold water. And periodically between songs would throw the bottles out into the crowd.
Oh, how sweet of them.
So nice.
Yeah.
So nice. But I was fucking soaked. I was like, and then that's not even counting the sweat. But
because, you know.
Oh, I know. But I got a signed guitar pick.
Nice.
It's pretty sweet. But yeah, they played all the hits. God, I'm so gross sometimes. But then I went to a wedding. And my dear friend Brad, and Megan. Brad, who I've known since like 1992. Megan, who I've known since like 2009. But they got married out in Leesburg. Went there. A friend of the show who's on the James Bond thing, Rich, and his wife, because he's back from his honeymoon in Santorini.
That's quick for them. Like, they get married and now they're already going to a wedding as a married couple. That's a quick turnaround.
That's the season.
Yeah.
There was so many open bars at that thing. So many open bars.
Did you get shit-faced?
Not as badly as you would think. But at one point when do I want to share this?
I don't know. Do you?
I'll share it off mic.
Ah.
Probably for the best. But I danced a lot. I fucking danced a lot.
You can dance if you want to.
And I want, yes. I'm trying to remember what the next line is.
You can leave your friends behind.
But I didn't.
Well, then it kind of ruins the rest of the
song. Sorry.
Because your friends do dance.
Yeah.
And let's shoot this bit in the head.
Right. So thanks again to...
Where's that car crash sound effect that you used to use?
So thanks again to Brandon for coming on the show. Green Monk is out in September. Check it out. This has been another installment of Catching Up. I'm Sam.
I'm Chris.
I'm Jake. Thank you very much.
Good night, Eric Bana.
This has been another Geek Out production. If you enjoyed what you heard, hey, we've got a special episode every Friday. Of course, there's the usual Catching Up show every Wednesday. And you get book club episodes just about every Tuesday these days. Thanks for listening.